When is the time for the children to get involved? How should they get involved? How much should they know? When should they know it? And I'm going to go back to sooner is always better than later.
There is no perfect time, right? I think the most optimal time depends on the relationship the parents have with the kids, but I think what we do know is that the most optimal time is for sure before it's needed, before it becomes a requirement of the children to be more involved, to be on bank accounts. They need to know far in advance of that.
Yeah, I would agree. I don't think there's a perfect time, but there's definitely a wrong time. And that's once we start seeing capacity decline in the parent, right? Once that starts happening, if the conversation hasn't happened already, it can become very disjointed, very awkward, very heavy and hard to deal with. It has always seen time and time again, if we can have that conversation when everyone's health is still good, the child can come in, get an understanding of what's going on in their parents' lives, but not need to step in or do or say anything, just be on the sidelines. Basically be the backup quarterback that knows all the plays, knows what's going on, and is ready to take over when needed, but in the moment is just there to observe.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And it sets them up for success, and it also it does help ensure that the aging parent, their wishes are ultimately fulfilled when you have the capacity to speak about it and give your thoughts earlier to the child on here's what I want, here's our wishes, right?
Yes. And it's not, surprisingly, it's not the difficulty of the child stepping in to help the parent when capacity starts to decline. It's if the parent hasn't made the conscious choice to let their child be involved prior to starting to see a decline in mental capacity, usually it's the parent that struggles the most with letting the child help out more, because they got a lot of other things going on in their life at that moment, and it becomes most difficult for them. Again, recap, there isn't a perfect time, but there's definitely a better time and there's definitely a worse time. So I highly encourage it. I think if we were talking in age of years, typically we're seeing that conversation happen in the 70s, right around 75-ish, earlier depending on health, a little bit later if you're super active and everything's going great. But I think 70s is usually that decade when making sure you've brought your children up to speed on what your financial situation looks like, what your wishes are, and things to be aware of is the perfect kind of general timing to do it. I'm not looking to get a Porsche, but a lot of people out there are looking to spend, a good chunk of money on a car that they felt like they've always wanted, would be really fun to have. And one of the ways we have found on any large purchase is if you have the ability to rent something first, rent it. Rent it for a few days or a week or whatever it may be. And in the case of a car, drive it around. See how you feel. See how it is. The kind of enjoyment you get out of it. Do you feel the same way with it, a week later as the first day or before you got it? And then to decide, do I want to make the purchase? Is it worth the investment into, that purchase for how I feel and my passions? Is it? Or is renting it for a handful of days scratch the itch, so to speak?
I do think that this is great for cars. It's great for, frankly, anything with wheels. Boats, jet skis, right? Does the utility you get the very first time you're in it match the sticker, the price? And then how do you feel after the 20th time, right? Does it go down, or is it as awesome as it was the first time, right? And that'll help determine, is this truly worth it to me?
We've talked about it, referred to this in as well as cars. The other thing I would say that is very easy and has become a dramatic change with technology and the rise of VRBOs and Airbnbs, it used to be buy a second home somewhere nice where you wanted to be. I think renting the first year or couple of years in the place you think you want to be is a really, really great way to decide whether or not it makes any sense at all to have a place permanently in a second place.
Yeah, the exception to that would be if it's a place you've, vacationed every year for the last 10 years or something like that.
Or
But
you got family down there,
yeah,
in a specific location. Of course, there's exceptions to that, but if it's just the general rule of we're here in Minnesota and I don't want to live in the snow now that I'm retired and I don't have to go to go to work every day, and I'm going somewhere warm and I'm pretty much picking a dot on the map, I highly recommend don't jump into ownership. Do a rental, rent it for a few months, see how you like it. Maybe if you want to try a few different places, it's a really, really great way to get out of the cold weather and try something new and see how much will you really use it. Is it in the spot you want it to be in order to make it worth spending the money on it?
we're a month after tax time. We've got some data on it. You and I do a fair amount on tax estimates, but specifically for our retired clients, figuring out where it makes sense to put their income for a year. And new legislation, some tax changes. There's news out that tax refunds are up 11% this year. Not surprising to me. I think that's on the federal side because states are going to vary a little bit more. But how do you view a tax refund? Because I think that what I have observed is that individuals seem to treat a tax refund like money that they found in their couch cushions. Like it just appears.
It's a bonus. It's a win. It's magical.
Right.
I think that's the general consensus, right? Is that refunds are up. That's a great thing. But let's circle back. What do you think, Mike? How do we think about that?
Well, you gave the government an interest-free loan for an extended amount of time. That's how I think about it. If you're getting really big refunds, I would look back and adjust your W-4 withholding. I don't think it's worth getting less throughout the year significantly just to get a quote unquote bonus in April. It doesn't make sense to me.
100%. I think our view and the way we try and tackle this for our clients and our families we work with is if somebody is earning, let's say, $250,000 to $500,000 a year, so they have a good tax liability, and we're going through that. Our goal when they file their tax return is that you're within a couple $1,000. Maybe under, maybe over. We want to be right in that ballpark. We don't want to have a penalty for underpayment, but we don't want to be giving the government a giant loan for no reason. And I know
interest-free loan.
Interest-free. I know far too often we'll see a prospect come in, we'll look at that tax return. They maybe had, their situation, they're maybe making, we'll call it $400,000. They're getting a $15,000 or a $20,000 refund. That's not what we want to see.
Something happened.
That is a lot of money. That is a lot of money we could have put in savings over the course of that year, as opposed to get it in a big chunk at the end of the year because we just gave somebody else that money for free. So
it is the sentiment around it, though. It's more than. I mean, it's just getting into the behavioral part of money, right? People would much rather get money than have to write a check. And so a part of that is understandable. But when you're talking several $1,000s, it does become to be a kind of a drag.
Yeah. And the biggest taxes are an unknown. It's, for the most part, it's this thing that has to be done and nobody knows about them and nobody understands them. And so what we try and do here when we're working with our families is we try and project out every single year so that we're all on the same page. We've looked at the situation. We've gone over it with our families. They understand then what we're targeting and how we're going to target that. So that then when tax time comes around, they have to file that return. They have an expectation of, hey, it's going to be right in this range. I'm not going to get a sticker shock because we've been talking about it. We've been planning for it. We know what our income was going to be, and they ran the calculation, and it's going to be, within a margin of error. Highly recommend doing that. If you're not doing tax planning, you're not getting a tax estimate throughout the year, then, I really recommend doing that. It really relieves a lot of anxiety, especially for the high income earners and the small business owners, right? That are, they have a lot of fluctuations, a lot going on, and it's a lot easier to plan and project throughout the year so that it's just a target. Speaking of planning, Americans are less confident about their retirement.
What do you think when you hear that? Because I've got some data that I can share with you. This is from 2026 Retirement Confidence Survey from the Employee Benefit Research Institute. 64% of Americans feel confident they'll have enough money to live comfortably in retirement. So that means 36% don't. Most workers, 4 in 5 and 7 in 10 retirees said they're worried the government will make changes to the U.S. retirement system. Meanwhile, fewer than 60% of workers say they have enough savings to cover an emergency expense. A lot to unpack here.
First, I don't think the statistics, they don't shock me when I read them because people are feeling the pressure of higher prices in the grocery store, at the gas tank, or gas pump now, right? And so that, again, all about unknown and planning, right? So it's going to be more expensive. How much more expensive? How will that play into where I'm at and what it's going to look like moving forward?
I think a big piece of this goes also to show some of the consumer sentiment that's out there right now. I mean, the most recent University of Michigan poll is consumer sentiment is at what they called all-time lows, which is hard to fathom a little bit because sentiment's down, but markets are at all-time highs.
There's a dislocation there. There's a dislocation between how people feel and what the current reality is of the economy here in the U.S. and also the markets, right? I mean, markets are pretty darn, if not at all-time highs, right? When thinking about the S&P 500 and, the U.S. market, there's a big dislocation there. I think that's coming from the fact that there's, news headlines are all over everywhere. They like to be bad. The headlines are typically written in a non-positive fashion because that generally produces more clicks for them. And then we are seeing it, like it's more expensive at the grocery store. It's more expensive when I go to the gas station. It's more expensive when I want to go on a trip.
It's more expensive at the doctor, right? Healthcare is up.
Yeah. So the feeling is there. It's then, trying to balance that with the reality of the other things. My net worth is higher. The markets are higher. I'm probably making more. The income is up, right? Salaries are up. Wages are up.
And so unemployment is still on the historically lower side, right?
Right.
People
so
are
we got
still
all
working.
These things
yeah.
that are positive, but they just don't make the headlines. They just don't. They're not in the news daily. And so I think it's harder and harder to rely on the sentiment of these surveys and take them as the gospel. I think it's a good place for us to understand how people are feeling, but I want to use this as a reminder that generally speaking, things are pretty good.